alert. Tomorrow, Brazil's controversial new president heads to the Oval Office to sit down with President Trump. But tonight, he's on Fox News at night. What Brazilian President Bolsonaro had to say when I asked him about his most contentious statements and tweets and allegations that his family could be linked to a murder. Do not miss this Fox News at Night exclusive. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin tonight with correspondent Kristen Fisher in the so-called Trump of the tropics. Brazil's president actually meeting President Trump tomorrow. But first, some breaking news on the Democratic probes into the president's finances. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Yeah, this report, the president of Brazil, so much so that he's called the Trump of the tropics. He's prolific on Twitter. In fact, one of his latest tweets from just a few hours ago really gives you a sense of how similar he sounds to President Trump. He said, quote, "Evil journalists recently spoke of being in the market generated by the government. Well, the stock market has now reached another historical mark. The expectations generated by the government's actions are the best, and positive news only appear. Brazil above all caps." Sound familiar? Well, tomorrow, Bolsonaro will meet President Trump in person for the very first time at the White House. Senior administration officials say the focus will be on trade in Venezuela. The two leaders will also hold what's sure to be a fiery joint press conference in the Rose Garden, where they'll likely highlight the improved relations between their two countries. So much so that today, Bolsonaro visited CIA headquarters and delivered a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where he blasted the views of his two predecessors as anti-American, telling the crowd, now you have a president who is a friend of the United States. But the far-right former Army captain has a long history of making comments that are antithetical to American values, especially when it comes to the LGBT community. And his family's relationship with corrupt police officers and paramilitary gangs that's making headlines right now. Just last week, two former Rio de Janeiro police officers were arrested for the assassination of a city councilwoman last year. And Brazilian media has been publishing photos of Bolsonaro with his arm around one of the suspects. Police say Bolsonaro's son had once dated the other suspect's daughter. So hard to imagine that Bolsonaro will not get asked at least one question about that at tomorrow's press conference, Shannon.
Yep, and we asked him about all of those things in our conversation with him today.
You beat him to it.
Well, we'll see how his answers compare tonight with tomorrow. Kristen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, on the occasion of his first foreign trip since taking office, I had the opportunity to sit down with President Bolsonaro today. Here is that exclusive conversation. I started out by asking him about the trade talks he'll hold with President Trump just hours from now.
Pronto para discutir.
We do wish to further deepen our trade links with the U.S. Not only trade, but we do wish to engage in a number of different agreements. And we want to increasingly seek out a proper understanding with the U.S. with a view to further consolidating and further expanding our trade flows. Brazil does have a great deal to offer the U.S., and the same is true the other way around.
There's been some discussion of the possibility of a U.S. base, military base being located in Brazil. I know there have been concerns about Russia and Venezuela having joint military exercises and their influence in the region. Anything on that front?
Venezuela is very much on our order of business for the talks tomorrow, quite certainly.
Our president has said everything is on the table with respect to the U.S. What role, if any, do you see the Brazilian military playing in this conflict in Venezuela, or not at all?
Trump did mention all possibilities. We, in turn, cannot talk about all possibilities because we do face certain constraints. However, whatever is realistically possible on the diplomatic front by way of assistance or aid in such a way as to ensure that the U.S. can overcome this issue. The one country that is most interested in putting an end to Maduro's drug trafficking dictatorship is Brazil. So today we have a new ideology, a new approach as adopted in Brazil, and we feel very much obliged to seek out a more appropriate alternative so as to ensure that Venezuela can go back to peace, democracy, and liberty.
There are new polls that show here in the U.S. that our younger generation views socialism favorably. They do not have a negative impact or a negative impression, most of them, of socialism. What would you say to them about the realities of socialism?
As far as Brazilian young people are concerned, yes, you're right. But the fact is that more recently, young people have very much turned their back on socialism and on communism. I often stated that we could not possibly allow Brazil to get to where Venezuela is today. And Venezuela has come to where it is today precisely following the way politics was addressed under the Lula da Silva and the Dilma Rousseff administrations, which led a substantial portion of the Brazilian population, a young population, to adhere to that approach.
So what do you say to people here in the U.S. who look at socialism and have a favorable assumption about it, that they see something positive there?
Well, I see President Trump fighting that trend, and I couldn't agree more with him. I think he's right. And to a certain extent, we're doing very much the same thing in Brazil. I think it is fair to say that, the American people who think about socialism should look at the experience of France, where borders were open to receive refugees without any kind of sorting or filter, if you will. And having open borders, in my view, is absolutely poor a decision. It is not at all a good decision. We do agree with President Trump's decision or proposal on the wall.
So what do you say to those who, whether it's our president with the wall or tightening immigration standards or asylum or refugee, that they say any suggestion that people coming here would overrun or be a negative impact on the country is a racist or bigoted view?
Well, I would believe those who say what they have to say against the wall if they removed the doors and walls from their own homes, and they would, therefore would allow everyone to come in.
Okay.
The vast majority of potential immigrants do not have good intentions or do not intend to do the best or do good to the U.S. people. I would very much like the U.S. to uphold the current immigration policy because, to a large extent, we owe our democracy in the Southern Hemisphere to the United States.
People have drawn a lot of parallels, calling you the Trump of the tropics. Some of your critics don't mean that in a positive way. They see that you use social media, and much like him, you speak your mind. And you have been criticized for things that you've said with regard to race, to women, to homosexuality. Your critics use your own words. They point back to things like you saying, I'm homophobic and proud of it. How do you answer those who want you to explain these remarks?
If I were all that, I would not at all have been elected president. So there's a great deal of fake news circulating around Brazil. And the population has, after all, learned how to use social media. And they no longer trust or believe the Brazilian mainstream media, which is virtually dominated by the left wing. I have nothing against the homosexuals or women. I'm not a xenophobe, but I want to have my house in order. The definition of a family, in my view, is one and the same as defined in the Bible. If you want to engage in a same-sex relationship, you can go ahead and do it, but we cannot allow the government to bring these contents to the classroom setting and teach school children as of age 5. I cannot possibly have anything against black people. My father-in-law is known as a big black man. So they got these sentences totally out of context to criticize me.
I have to ask you about something you retweeted during Carnival. That was sexual in nature. Why did you retweet it and the comment that you made?
This video was circulating on the web already, and we just shared it to try to showcase how way off the track Carnival is going in Brazil.
Did you think it would generate so much controversy?
Well, not really. I have always acted that way. Also, one of the things that got me elected as president was my sense of respect to families, principles, traditions, and customs. And of course, respect towards our culture, as well as our religion. I am a Christian. I cannot become president, totally change my way of living and doing things, which happens to be very common in the political circles.
Within the last few days, there have been some arrests in the murder of Marielle Franco. There are apparently the suspects former police officers. There are those who want to draw a connection between you, your family, potentially those police officers. Police have said anything there is coincidental, but I want to give you a chance to answer those who are questioning whether you had any link to that murder.
I am a former Brazilian Army captain, and the military police officers in Rio de Janeiro, to a large extent, are good friends of mine. By coincidence, one of these alleged killers of my Marielle police officers wasn't really a neighbor of mine. I mean, he lived on the opposite side of the other street. But of course, the media that has always criticized me, they wanted to establish a clear connection. But I've never saw that gentleman in my gated community. I spend a lot of time outside the gated community. I don't really spend that much time to, engage in social life with them. I only learned he lived there after the article became public. My stepdaughter did seem to know someone. They even tried to say that my former or my youngest boy, who is currently a 20-year-old boy, may have dated the man's young lady or young daughter. I asked him, did you date her? And he said, well, I dated just about every girl in the gated community. I can't remember her. If you show me the picture, I can possibly see who she is. I only learned about Marielle Franco after she was killed. She was a councilwoman, and I had never ever heard heard anything about her life. And one further point, what kind of motivation could I possibly have to be the mastermind of some kind of murder like that? I didn't even know her. On the other hand, however, the person who stabbed me was affiliated with a left-wing party, the PSOL party, up until 2014. So between that evening and the following day, 4 renowned lawyers and attorneys, of course, stepped up to advocate and defend the person who tried to stab him to death. At a given point in time, the left wing said, no one actually, in the media never said that, the left wing tried to kill Jair Bolsonaro. No one ever said that. Much on the contrary, people did announce that some of them were probably frustrated because I never died as a result.
I know you had a dinner last night. Several people were there. Steve Bannon, who was a key architect of working with the president in many of his endeavors in his campaign and moving forward. They have parted ways. I know that he is in an agreement or a partnership with your son in some way. Tell me about your family's relationship or your views of Steve Bannon.
Well, the one person who does have contacts with Steve Bannon is my son, member of Congress Eduardo Bolsonaro. There has been this divorce between Bannon and Trump. I'm not here to cause any, say, discomfort between anyone, but I mean, these opinion makers who work and live in the U.S. got together, and I was invited to join them for this working dinner. And I, of course, had to be kind with everyone.
So your conversation with him tomorrow, what are you looking forward to most? You have so many commonalities about the way you came to power, those who disregarded your ability to be elected, your use of social media. Do you connect more on personality or policy, or do you think it's both?
We do have a great deal in common. As I perceive things from Brazil, I have always admired him. I will not deny that. I have been highly criticized because of this, but I will not, of course, deny what I do think. I'm not a chameleon. I am a very straightforward, objective, honest person. And what I want to ensure is that Brazil be a great nation, just as Trump wants America to be great again. So our conversation tomorrow will be largely based on the prospects for helping each other, because although although the U.S. is a large country economically and also on the military front, it is always good, of course, to nourish economic and friendship ties with a country like Brazil in South America. And I'm willing to open my heart up to him and do whatever is good to the benefit of both the Brazilian and the American people.